on to lifting and moving patients. These next few chapters are all kind of the same. It's going to be like just general awareness, knowledge stuff. So we're going to talk about lifting and moving patients, and then we'll move on to ambulance operations and that kind of stuff. So some people think this stuff is boring. Sure, it's not very exciting, but it is really important. If you're lifting correctly, you can really injure yourself. So it is important to talk about. So our guidelines here when we're working with our patients is obviously do no harm, do no further harm. Move the patient only when necessary. Try not to move around a whole lot. Move the patient's body as a unit. There's some pretty funny videos on YouTube of people doing that wrong. Use proper lifting and moving techniques, and have one rescuer give commands. And we'll kind of talk about these in greater depth as we go along. So when in doubt, if you're going to move a patient, cool, wait. If you have to wait a few minutes, if it's a non-critical patient and you need some extra help moving him, sure, delay if you need to, so you can have a safe lift. That's always the priority. Remember, your own safety is like the #1 priority. So make sure you treat the patient. Do not step over the patient. A lot of new EMTs do that, and yeah, sure, you can step over them, but eventually you're gonna trip and bad things will happen. So do not step over the patient. Always explain to the patient what they're doing, especially if you're doing some kind of technical thing with straps on the spine board. You kind of forget that there's like a person on that board. So just make sure you keep the patient informed of all that. But yeah, we don't want to be moving them around a ton. So know your physical limitations, keep yourself balanced, maintain a firm footing, lift and lower with your legs, not your back. You probably heard that before. And put your arms as close to your body as possible. Okay, so this is just if you're like getting the litter out or something. Unconscious patients who have not suffered trauma should be placed in the recovery position. And this really is a safe position that allows them, so if they vomit, it'll just come out. Because if they're on their back and they vomit, they could breathe it in, and that can be it. Right? So use good body mechanics. Always remember that. If you need to take a few extra seconds to get a good setup, do that. There's nothing worse than you're in a rush and you got one foot on the cabinet and one foot over here and you got your knee in a, it's not good. So just if you need to take a few extra seconds to really get that good base, do it. So this is stuff that we've probably all heard of before. I know if you have a job, they always talk about this stuff like in the back room because they don't want to pay workman's comp. So like I said before, call for additional help if you need. All right, now, so everything I said about delaying patient movement for proper help is good, except for these situations. So if there's danger of fire, explosion, or collapse and you're in there, get them out. I mean, sure, you probably weren't going to be in there in the first place, but because of scene safety. But let's just say that the scene was safe and now there's some sort of unsafe thing going on. Just pull them out. Hazardous material, same kind of thing. An accident scene that cannot be protected, so same kind of thing, like a dangerous area, avalanche, something like that. You're going to have to move them if you can't do the stuff you have to do. So move them if you need to do life-saving care. And if the patient's in cardiac arrest, well, they're dead. So already. So if you want to change that, you got to move. Okay, so these are just some of the random drags we're going to talk about, just so you're familiar with them. Clothing drag, probably the simplest one to do. You grab right by the shoulders, and the whole shirt kind of acts as like a framework for the body, and you can just pull the shirt. Now, sure, this one, the picture is a little bit off, and I left it in here though to show you kind of what wrong looks like. So in the previous picture, you grabbed kind of by the shoulders, right, and that could drag the patient. Here, they're kind of grabbing behind the neck, and you can see the clothing is kind of strangling the patient. So we want to think wide. We don't want to grab a small area. All right, blanket drag. These are actually pretty nice. You can do a blanket drag in a lot of different environments. They're good for like hip fractures and all that stuff because it's not like the force of lift that you have is spread out over the entire blanket, so it's less likely to cause some sort of damage. Arm drag. Okay, so this is takes a little bit longer to set up because you got to sit him up and put his arms up and stuff. But this is a good drag. Firefighter drag. This is more for like in a fire with smoke, and so you want to stay low to the ground. You can do this move, but just kind of situation dependent. All right. So cool. Yep, there you go. Kind of makes sense. Like, you know, kind of common sense. Okay, 2 or more rescuers, we can do that. And remember, try to get 2 rescuers when possible, or more. Okay, this is a seat carry. Yeah, this is literally you have them in a chair, but this is good. Now, this is for patients who are alert and oriented, right? You're not going to do this with an unconscious patient. This is good for a patient who can follow commands, but you're kind of in a tricky area. Maybe it's an unsafe area, maybe it's a narrow hallway or something. This seat drag is or seat carry, I mean. Cradle and arms, yep, that's good for. Okay, the chair carry, we'll talk about it a little bit, but there's something called the stair chair, which is just a chair with handles on it. So we want to do that though. The way they're holding it is probably the best way for like center of gravity reasons. All right, pack strap carry. This is a good one. You can take them out of vehicles like this. The reason I like it is because you're walking forward, you're walking in the same direction, like you're looking in the same direction you're walking. If you're doing under the arms grab, you're kind of walking backwards, and we don't want to do that if we can avoid it. All right, so this is a direct ground lift for basically like C-spine or cervical spine or like spinal trauma. This is the one where you can have a lot of people help you out. If it's a broken ankle, if the patient can work with you a little bit, they can kind of help. But if it's any sort of spine thing, really you don't want that patient moving on their own at all. So you can use some blanket drags or different things to move. So there you go. That's all they're saying there is, and you can see there's 4 people there. So any sort of spinal thing, be very careful, and it's okay if you use quite a few people to move correctly. Okay, so this is like for walking assist. I mean, it's kind of a common sense one, right? You can just kind of arm over the. This is a 2-person version of that. That's fine. That's good for like, you know, broken extremity. All right. These are the gurneys for the ambulances. They can come and go out of the ambulance pretty easily. Ours, unfortunately, in the school district, it's an older model that's like mechanical. The new gurneys are all automatic now. So going forward, I will try and buy an automatic one, but we'll see. Okay, so stretchers. These are just some of the different portable stretchers that are out there. There's a stair chair, like I said, right? It's a chair with some restraining devices, and it's got some handles on it. Good for going up and down stairs. All right, backboards. We already played around with this in class, so I can just burn through it kind of quick. Remember, these are going away. These aren't super popular anymore. There's lots of issues with spine boards. You can, if you guys are taking CNA, you probably heard of like bed sores, that kind of thing. That's a very good way to get bed sores, these spine boards. It increases patient anxiety because now they're strapped into this device. It can actually restrict breathing by up to 15%. And even there's some studies that show that actually there's higher mortality with a spine board, weirdly enough. So EMS is actually going away from long spine boards. However, in a spinal injury, like I got in a car accident, I can't feel my legs, that kind of thing, sure. But for the most part, we're gone away from the old days where everybody gets a spine board. There's the new thing that we're doing, and unfortunately, I'll have to show you guys next year or something. But it's like a full body vacuum splint, and basically it's a big quilt almost, and you put them in it, and you suck the air out of it, and it vacuum seals around the patient, and that's probably better than these long boards. Okay, short backboard. This is for a seated backboard. Man, you just don't see these anymore. I was talking to a firefighter this year who said he's been a firefighter for 5 years, and he's done that once. So it's something we'll talk about. It's something to be aware of, right? But we're not really going to do it. We can practice it, but I wouldn't expect to see this a whole lot out in town. All right, scoop stretchers. These are cool because they separate in the middle, and then you can put them back together. So that way there's not this big log rolling mess you have to do. So if you need to, be creative. Make a backboard however you can. All right, so we're seeing here this is for head or spine injury. Kind of already been talking about it. You got to put that cervical collar on. You got to do full precautions. Similarly to the full body vacuum splint, there's actually cervical collars that are vacuum splints. We're really going towards the direction of these vacuum splint, air splint kind of things, just because it spreads that pressure out a little bit more. It's easier to individualize for the patient. Sometimes the hard plastic cervical collars don't fit quite right, and you can adjust them, but sometimes they're not perfect. So the air cervical splint works better. Okay, so that's just so you guys remember that from holding C-spine and all that when we practice that spine board. All right, so what they're saying here is any patient who has a spinal trauma, like from a motor vehicle crash or a fall, should go on a spine board. And the reason they're saying this next one, person who sustained a gunshot to the trunk, is we don't know where that bullet went. And so there's a chance that it could have ricocheted or it's pretty near that spine. We're just being careful. So I know it's maybe more annoying for everybody involved, takes a little bit longer, but if that's the difference between a person recovering fully and a person being quadriplegic, it's probably worth it just to support them. Okay, so if you suspect there's some sort of spinal trauma, you want to move them as a unit, face up obviously. One rescuer gives commands. That's a big deal just because if there's 3 different people talking, I've seen it happen. 3 different people talking, then there's 3 different countdowns, and then I've seen some bad things happen. So just make sure it's one rescuer, usually the person at the head. Okay. So log rolling, like I said, we've reviewed this once earlier this semester. And basically what I like to do, so for the command, always say what you're going to do first. Is it ready, lift, move, 1, 2, 3, move? We're going to move on 3, 1, 2, 3, however that goes. And also, don't necessarily say, hey, is everybody ready? It's better to say, is anyone not ready? That's a little bit more of an individualized, important question. So usually when I ask a question, make sure everyone's there, and then explain like if you're in command, what is your commands going to be for the patient? This is a straddle lift. As you can tell, it takes more work, but it's very ideal because now you have 4 people on it. The log roll, sometimes, you log roll and back onto the board and it's not quite right, and then you have to shimmy them back and forth. If you do it this way, a little bit more work on the front end, but if you do it this way, you pretty much are going to have your patient down on the spine board, the correct position every time. All right, so that's all that's saying. Okay. So they're basically, these are just different types of you can do. Every patient who's strapped to something or who's on some sort of board should be strapped to it. There's all sorts of different ways. There's Velcro, there's buckles, there's all these things. The seatbelt version, it's all good, but just remember, like, you need to attach them to the board. Okay. And generally, the rule here is we just want to make sure we don't do the head first. Some people think, oh, head first, go down. The reason we don't want to do that is if we're worried about spinal trauma, that neck is a very important hinge point. So if we lock down the head and the rest of the body is free to move, well, there you go. You could have a lot of damage there. So we want to do like the chest first, the kind of the bulk of the body, strap that in first, then we can do that. Okay. And when the C-spine person, this is a common thing I'll also see is people are holding C-spine and they put the cervical collar on, they put some padding there, and then they let go. You actually are not supposed to let go until that head is fully immobilized. So whether you got tape, Velcro, cravats like talking about here, however it works, then you can let go, all right? But until that head is secured to the device, someone. Okay, we have this model in our classroom. We also have a few different models. This is what's called like a head bed, and it's just a nice soft padding that you can it's Velcro, so you can kind of adjust it as you need it. So on the last thing, sometimes I have seen this, especially if you have to do some heavy lifting, but there's just that rivalry between firefighters and EMS. So that was it. I know it was a quick down and dirty lecture. A lot of this stuff I would have liked to have shown you in class, but here we are. So this is really just for your awareness of some of the different lifts and stuff that we use in EMS.